And now investigators are deploying new technology and analyzing other evidence, hoping for a breakthrough to bring Nancy home. Investigators are using a device known as a signal sniffer to try to detect signals from the 84-year-old's pacemaker.
There is a device inside Nancy Guthrie's chest that has been recording everything. Every heartbeat, every movement, every moment of elevated stress, every physiological change her body went through on the night she disappeared. All of it stored, all of it time-stamped, all of it sitting inside a small electronic device implanted in her chest that the FBI has been fighting to decode since the first week of February. And what they found inside that data is what this video is about. Because here is what most people do not understand about modern pacemakers. They are not just heart regulators. They are not just devices that send an electrical pulse to keep a heart beating in rhythm. Modern pacemakers are data recorders. They log, they timestamp, they track, they sync wirelessly with paired devices, they communicate. They leave a trail of information that in the right hands, with the right tools, can reconstruct a timeline of events that no camera, no witness, and no physical evidence could ever replicate with the same precision. Nancy Guthrie has one of those devices in her chest, and the FBI has spent 68 days trying to read what it recorded on the night of February 1st. If you are not subscribed to Evidence True Crime TV yet, this is the moment. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because what we are about to break down is the most technically detailed, most forensically significant development in this entire investigation, and you want to be here when the next piece surfaces. Before we go into the data and the timelines and the forensic analysis, I need to stop for a moment. Because behind every data point in this video, every timestamp, every cardiac phase, every physiological measurement, there is a person. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is a mother, a grandmother, a woman who went to dinner with her family on January 31st and came home and was taken in the night. A woman whose own heart recorded what was done to her, and whose family has been waiting 68 days for answers that have not come. If you are a person of faith, please pray for Nancy Guthrie right now. Pray that she is found. Pray that she is safe. In about 60 seconds, I am going to correct something that has been misreported in nearly every piece of coverage this case has received. And once you understand why it is wrong, you will understand the significance of what the FBI actually found. Stay with me. Before we get into the data itself, I need to correct something that has been misreported, misunderstood, or oversimplified in nearly every piece of coverage this case has received since February. The narrative that emerged early was this: Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing at 2:28 in the morning, and therefore that is when something happened to her. That is not correct. And understanding why it is not correct is the key to understanding everything the pacemaker data actually reveals. When news outlets reported that Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing at 2:28, what they were describing was the moment the pacemaker stopped communicating with its paired device, most likely a bedside monitoring unit or a smartphone app. That sync stopping does not mean the pacemaker stopped working. It does not mean Nancy's heart stopped. It means the wireless connection between the pacemaker and its paired device was broken. There are several reasons that connection could break. The paired device could have been moved out of range. Nancy could have been moved. The paired device could have been powered off or disabled. There could have been physical interference with the signal. But here is what makes this crucial. The pacemaker itself continued recording internally. Even after the sync stopped at 2:28, the device inside Nancy's chest kept doing what pacemakers do. It kept logging, it kept timestamping, it kept a record of every cardiac event, every arrhythmia, every significant physiological change, every moment her heart rate spiked or dropped outside of normal parameters. That internal record is what the FBI has been working to access, and what they found inside it is more detailed and more disturbing than most people realize.
In about 60 seconds, I'm going to walk you through exactly how forensic cardiac analysis works. Stay with me. I want to spend real time explaining the forensic process here, because I think a lot of people hear the phrase pacemaker data and think it is like pulling a file off a computer. It is not. And understanding the process helps you understand why it took weeks to get results, and why those results carry the evidentiary weight that they do.
Modern cardiac implantable electronic devices record data in what are called device memory logs. These logs store information about every cardiac event the device detects and responds to. Every time the device delivers a pacing pulse, logged. Every arrhythmia detected, logged with a timestamp. Every time the heart rate exceeds or drops below programmed threshold parameters, logged. Every significant physiological event the device is designed to monitor, timestamped and stored. The level of detail is extraordinary. Cardiac device manufacturers design these logs specifically to give cardiologists a detailed retrospective picture of a patient's cardiac health. In a medical context, this data adjusts medications and modifies device settings. In a forensic context, this same data becomes a timeline of physiological events that can be cross-referenced against a criminal investigation. To access this data from an implanted device when the patient is not present and cooperative, the FBI works with the manufacturer's forensic liaison team. Every major cardiac device manufacturer has established protocols for working with law enforcement. These manufacturers have proprietary software called programmers that can wirelessly interrogate an implanted device and download its full internal memory. In a clinical setting, this takes minutes. In a forensic setting, it is more complicated. Nancy is missing. The pacemaker is inside her. The FBI cannot simply ask her to come in for a device interrogation session. They have to work with what they have. And what they have is the data that synced to Nancy's paired monitoring device before 2/28, and the data that transmitted to the device manufacturer's cloud monitoring platform, which many modern pacemakers sync to automatically through a home monitoring base unit. The cloud data does not disappear when the sync ends. It stays in the cloud, timestamped, preserved. The FBI subpoenaed that cloud data within the first week of the investigation. The manufacturer complied, and the forensic cardiac analysis that followed is what has produced the most significant findings in this case. Let me take you through the cardiac timeline that the FBI's forensic analysis of Nancy's pacemaker data has produced, moment by moment, because each segment tells a different part of the story. The evening of January 31st begins normally. Nancy spends the evening at her daughter Annie's home, dinner with Annie and her husband Tommaso. Her cardiac data during this period shows completely normal baseline activity. A resting heart rate appropriate for her age, no arrhythmias, no significant events. Just a woman having dinner with her family. Tommaso drives Nancy home. The drive takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Her cardiac data continues showing normal baseline levels. She arrives. The garage door closes behind her at approximately 10:10 p.m. And here is where the first anomaly appears.
Approximately 45 minutes to an hour after Nancy arrived home, somewhere between 10:50 and 11:30 in the evening, her heart rate shows a brief elevation above her normal resting baseline. Not dramatic, not an arrhythmia, just a measurable increase that lasted a few minutes and then returned to baseline. Forensic cardiologists describe it as consistent with a stress response, the kind of brief cardiac elevation you see when someone hears an unexpected noise, sees something unexpected, or has a brief moment of alertness. It is not conclusive. It could be explained by many things, but it is there, it is time-stamped, and it is the first data point in a cardiac timeline that becomes significantly more dramatic as the night progresses. Between 11:30 and approximately 1:30 in the morning, Nancy's cardiac data shows patterns consistent with rest.
Heart rate lowered, rhythm regular. The device recording without significant events. Then between 1:40 and 1:50 in the morning, the data changes. In the same window that the doorbell camera footage shows the masked figure approaching the property and disabling the camera, Nancy's pacemaker shows a significant cardiac event. Her heart rate elevates sharply. The elevation is dramatic and sudden, consistent with an acute stress response, consistent with fear, consistent with the physiological reaction a person has when they are startled awake by an intruder. The timestamp on the cardiac elevation and the timestamp on the camera being disabled at 1:47 are within the same narrow window. That correlation is not a coincidence. That is the pacemaker recording Nancy Guthrie's physiological response to the moment her abduction began. Now we get to the 41 minutes, the window between 1:47 when the camera went dark and 2:28 when the sync stopped, the center of this entire investigation. The pacemaker data from inside those 41 minutes is the most significant forensic finding in this case, and I want to walk through it carefully because it breaks down into 3 distinct phases, each one telling a different part of the story of what happened to Nancy.
The heart rate, which had been elevated throughout most of the 41 minutes, begins to show a specific type of variability that forensic cardiologists associate with sedation or loss of consciousness. Not cardiac arrest, not death. The heart continues beating, the pacemaker continues functioning, but the variability pattern, the natural beat-to-beat variation that a conscious person's heart shows, begins to decrease. Decreased heart rate variability in this context is clinically significant. It is the pattern a heart shows when the central nervous system's normal regulatory influence on cardiac function is reduced, when someone is deeply sedated, unconscious, or has been administered a substance that affects consciousness. The sync stops at 2:28. At that point, no more data reaches the cloud platform. The internal device continues recording after 2:28, but that internal data is inside Nancy, inside a device that can only be accessed when she is found. The sedation question is what everything in those 41 minutes has been building toward. In about 60 seconds, I am going to address it directly, because it deserves an honest, clear, fact-grounded discussion. Stay with me. If you have made it this far, you understand what those 41 minutes actually contained. Not a gap in the record, a record. If this level of forensic coverage, the kind that goes further than any headline, is what you have been looking for in this case, please subscribe to Evidence True Crime right now. Hit like, drop a comment. Tell me, which phase of the 41-minute cardiac timeline stands out most to you? And stay, because the sedation finding is the most significant thing this video has to tell you, and it comes next. Let me address this directly, because it has been circling the edges of this investigation for weeks. The pacemaker data from the final portion of the 41-minute window is consistent with pharmacological sedation. That is the clinical language. Pharmacological sedation means a drug-induced alteration of consciousness, something administered to Nancy by injection, inhalation, or ingestion that reduced her level of consciousness in the final minutes before the sync stopped. The significance of this finding for the investigation is enormous. First, it tells us that whoever took Nancy came prepared.
You do not accidentally have sedatives on your person. You plan for them, you acquire them, you bring them. The presence of a sedating agent in this abduction, if the cardiac data interpretation is correct, tells us that the planning for this operation included pharmacological preparation. This is not opportunistic crime. This is deeply premeditated, logistically sophisticated, professionally executed. Second, it tells us something important about Nancy's condition at the time the sync stopped. She was not dead at 2:28 in the morning. The cardiac patterns showing sedation are not the patterns of cardiac arrest or death. The heart was beating, The pacemaker was functioning. The patterns are consistent with someone who is unconscious or deeply sedated, but alive. Third, it tells investigators what to look for. If a sedative was administered, there may be physical evidence at the scene, injection marks, chemical residue. Forensic toxicology of any biological material left at the scene could potentially identify the specific compound used, and the identity of that compound could narrow the field of who had access to it. Fourth, and most significantly for the investigation's current direction, the type of sedation that produces the cardiac pattern seen in the data has a specific profile. It is not something available at any pharmacy. The compounds that produce this type of rapid onset sedation with the cardiac signature visible in the pacemaker data are controlled substances, medical-grade compounds, the kind that leave a procurement trail, a prescription trail, a hospital or pharmacy acquisition trail. Someone who obtained what was used on Nancy Guthrie that night did not buy it at a grocery store, and the FBI knows that. And that procurement trail, wherever it leads, is one of the most significant investigative threads currently being followed. The honest answer is nuanced, and I want to give you the honest answer rather than the sensational one. Modern pacemakers do not have built-in GPS. They are not tracking devices in the way a phone or a car's navigation system is. They cannot transmit real-time location coordinates. The data they record is cardiac and physiological, not geographic. However, the accelerometer data in the pacemaker logs, which records physical movement and its characteristics, can in some circumstances provide information about the type of movement the patient was experiencing, the duration of sustained movement, the rhythmic patterns of vehicle travel, the vibration signatures of different types of terrain and transportation. Forensic analysis of accelerometer data has been used in a small number of legal cases to provide information. The pacemaker data shows sustained physical movement beginning in the middle of the 41-minute window. The duration and character of that movement, based on the accelerometer logs, is consistent with vehicle transportation. Not walking, not being dragged across a room. The pattern is consistent with being placed in a vehicle that then traveled for a period. The movement data continues up to the point where the sync stops at 2:28. At that point, 41 minutes after the camera was disabled and the abduction began, the vehicle had been traveling for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes of vehicle travel from Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills at the speeds accessible on highway routes south of Tucson in the middle of the night. That travel radius puts the vehicle anywhere from 12 to 25 miles from Nancy's home at the moment the sync stopped. And when you overlay that radius on a map, certain corridors become immediately significant. The interstate route south toward Rio Rico and the Mexican border falls within that radius. Within 15 to 20 minutes of highway travel from Nancy's home heading south, a vehicle could reach the northern outskirts of the area where law enforcement conducted its February 10th operation. That is not a coincidence, and investigators know it. The geographic radius from the movement data, 12 to 25 miles from the Catalina foothills, gives the detection team a prioritized search zone. In about 60 seconds, I am going to tell you about the Bluetooth detection effort and exactly how the cardiac data guides where investigators are looking. Stay with me. Modern pacemakers emit a low-power Bluetooth signal when they are in proximity to a compatible reader device. This signal is used by the home monitoring base unit to collect and transmit data to the manufacturer's cloud platform. The range is typically 15 to 30 feet, short but meaningful. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, the FBI deployed specialized equipment designed to detect this type of low-power Bluetooth signal. Equipment that can identify the specific Bluetooth signature of Nancy's device model and manufacturer, allowing investigators to search an area for any signal that matches her pacemaker's profile. This sounds straightforward.
If Nancy is alive and her pacemaker is functioning, walk around with a detector until you get a hit. Except it is not straightforward at all. The range of the signal is short, very short. Detection requires the search equipment to be within approximately 15 to 30 feet of Nancy's body to register a signal. And if Nancy is inside a building, underground, in a vehicle, or in any environment that provides shielding between her and the detector, the signal may not reach the detector even from within that range. To have any realistic chance of detecting her signal, investigators need to be searching the right geographic.
This is where the pacemaker data analysis becomes directly connected to the detection effort. The accelerometer and cardiac data, which constrains Nancy's probable location at the time the sync stopped to a radius of 12 to 25 miles from her home, give the detection team a prioritized search zone. Instead of searching randomly, they can focus their detection efforts on the areas most consistent with what the cardiac data tells them about the vehicle's travel distance and direction. Law enforcement has been conducting detection sweeps in specific geographic areas based on this analysis. The details of exactly where those sweeps have focused are not public. They should not be public. If Nancy is in one of those locations and the search approach is disclosed prematurely, the people holding her would move. But the sweeps are happening. They have been happening since the first week of February, and they continue today. Pacemaker data has been used as evidence in criminal proceedings in the United States. It is a relatively recent development in forensic medicine, but there is established precedent. In 2018, an Ohio man was convicted of arson and insurance fraud, partly on the basis of pacemaker data that contradicted his account of the night his house burned down. He claimed he was asleep. The data showed he was physically active during the time he said he was unconscious. His own heart gave him away. In Nancy's case, the pacemaker data serves a different but equally powerful function. There is no alibi to destroy because no suspect has been named publicly. What the data does in this case is reconstruct the crime. It fills in the 41-minute window that external surveillance could not cover. It documents the physiological reality of what Nancy experienced. The arc of physiological evidence, the fear response at 1:47, the sustained distress, the movement patterns consistent with transportation, and the sedation signature in the final phase, together create a narrative of the abduction that no human witness and no physical evidence could have provided with the same level of physiological precision. And in a prosecution, that physiological narrative, explained clearly to a jury by a forensic cardiologist, is extraordinarily powerful. It is Nancy's own heart testifying to what was done to her. And that testimony cannot be cross-examined. It cannot be impeached. It cannot be claimed to be biased or mistaken. Her heart recorded what happened. The FBI has that record. I want to tell you about something that has received almost no attention in any public coverage of this case, and it is something that could be as significant as the pacemaker data itself. Nancy Guthrie, at age 84 and in her overall health condition, was almost certainly wearing or carrying at least one additional connected health monitoring device on the night she disappeared. Beyond the pacemaker, elderly individuals with cardiac conditions frequently use multiple health monitoring technologies. Home blood pressure monitors with Bluetooth connectivity, medical alert wearables, remote patient monitoring devices.
The FBI's deliberate silence on this point suggests either that no additional relevant devices were present, or that additional device data exists and is being protected as active investigative evidence. Given that Nancy was under ongoing medical care for cardiac issues significant enough to warrant an implanted pacemaker, the latter possibility deserves serious consideration. The FBI knows exactly what devices were in that house. They conducted a forensic sweep of the property in the first days of the investigation,
Every electronic device, every paired monitor, every Bluetooth-enabled appliance was cataloged. And the data from every one of those devices is part of the investigative record that has been building for 68 days. There is a time-sensitive dimension to the pacemaker situation that I think is important to discuss directly and honestly.
Investigators who handle a piece of evidence carelessly in the public sphere do not get a second chance. The FBI is not being careless with the pacemaker data. They are being precise, methodical, and strategic. And every day they maintain that strategic silence is a day they preserve the investigative advantage that Nancy's own heart gave them. Let me connect the pacemaker data directly to the note that arrived at TMZ claiming Nancy Guthrie is dead. As I covered in our previous video, on April 6th, someone sent 2 notes to TMZ. The first claimed Nancy was dead. The second, from the same sender on the same morning, claimed they saw her alive in Sonora, Mexico. Retired FBI agents called the notes fraudulent. The Bitcoin wallet received 0 transactions. The contradiction between the 2 notes was the most obvious red flag. But here is what the pacemaker data adds to that analysis. The cardiac data from the 41-minute window shows that Nancy was alive and her pacemaker was functioning at 2:28 in the morning of February 1st. The sync stopped not because Nancy's heart stopped, but because the wireless connection was broken, most likely because she was in a vehicle moving away from her home monitoring base unit. The pacemaker data does not show cardiac arrest at 2:28. It shows a functioning heart in a significantly altered physiological state, most consistent with pharmacological sedation at the moment the cloud sync broke. Nancy Guthrie was almost certainly alive at 2:28 in the morning of February 1st. The TMZ note claiming she is dead is inconsistent with what the pacemaker data shows at the last moment of recorded data. That does not prove she is currently alive. 68 days have passed since that last data point. But it does tell us that whoever wrote those notes to TMZ is not working from knowledge of the pacemaker data. They do not have access to what the device recorded. They are guessing, and their guess is inconsistent with the most medically rigorous evidence this investigation has produced. Let me be honest with you about where this investigation is and what it would take to produce an arrest, because 68 days is a long time, and you deserve an honest assessment of the path forward. The pacemaker data gives investigators a physiological reconstruction of the abduction and a constrained geographic search zone. That is significant. But physiological data alone does not produce an arrest. You need a suspect. You need to be able to place a specific person in that physiological narrative. The things that would connect a specific person to the pacemaker data and therefore break this case open fall into 4 categories. First, the procurement trail for the sedating agent. If the cardiac data interpretation is correct, someone acquired a medical-grade compound to use in this abduction. That acquisition happened somewhere, through a medical contact, a dark web marketplace, a diverted prescription, a theft from a medical facility. Trails like that in an era of pharmaceutical tracking are very difficult to erase completely. Second, the Bitcoin trail. The original ransom demand included a Bitcoin wallet. That wallet is being watched. Every movement of funds is visible on the blockchain. If the actual kidnappers ever move or cash out from that wallet, investigators will see it. Third, the DNA evidence. Beyond the glove DNA that was traced and found to be unrelated, other biological material was collected from the scene. When DNA results are being this carefully protected, it typically means they are meaningful and prosecution ready. Fourth, human intelligence. Someone knows something. Someone who is in a position to see, to hear, to be peripherally involved, who has been carrying that knowledge for 68 days. The weight of that knowledge does not get lighter over time, it gets heavier. People talk, sometimes to law enforcement, sometimes to someone who eventually calls a tip line.
The $1 million reward from the Guthrie family is still active, and 68 days of conscience is a long time to hold something that heavy alone.
Day 68. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker recorded every heartbeat of those 41 minutes. The fear at 1:47, the sustained distress, the movement patterns, the final sedated silence before the sync stopped at 2:28. Her own heart, the heart that has been beating for 84 years, recorded what was done to her. And the FBI has that record. The fake notes and the empty Bitcoin wallets and the TMZ inbox and the noise of 2 months of fraudulent claims, none of that changes what is inside that data. None of that erases the physiological record of what Nancy's heart witnessed. The evidence is there. The investigation is active. And the forensic foundation the FBI has built from 68 days of painstaking cardiac data analysis is not going away. Someone will be held accountable for what those 41 minutes recorded. If you have any information, any detail, however small, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. or submit anonymously online at tips.fbi.gov. If you are in the medical or pharmaceutical community and encountered an unusual request for controlled sedating compounds in the weeks before or around February 1st, that information is relevant. Contact the FBI. Your observation could be the piece of the procurement trail that investigators are missing. Nancy Guthrie is not forgotten. Her family is still waiting. The investigation continues. And the answer has been in her chest the whole time. Before you go, 3 things. 1. Subscribe to Evidence True Crime right now. 2. Like this video. 3. Drop your answer in the comments. Type Amen for Nancy first. Then tell me which phase of the 41-minute cardiac data stands out most to you. And what does the sedation finding tell you about who planned this? This channel has few subscribers. Every single person who subscribes is what keeps this forensic coverage going. Every comment keeps Nancy's name visible when the official channels go quiet. You watched to the end. You care. Type Amen. Subscribe, and let's keep the pressure on. We will keep watching, we will keep reporting, and Nancy Guthrie is not forgotten.